weird.
All right. Okay. Welcome everyone to the webinar today. So today's webinar's topic is, are you pink eye ready? So my name's Stephanie Bullen and I'm the National Animal Health and Welfare Lead at Dairy Australia, and I was a practicing vet in Gippsland for, well, I was down in Gippsland for 12 years, so lots of familiar faces on the call. So my name's, as I said, my name is Steph. But before I begin today's webinar, I just want to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people, who are the traditional custodians on the land of which I'm currently sitting, and to those traditional custodians on the lands on which each of you are joining today. I would like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples that are joining us today. So I think with over 150 registrations for the webinar, it really is a testament of how frustrating pink eye is as a disease. And most dairy farmers have dealt with pink eye in most regions. If you've ever had anything stuck in your eye or any kind of eye injury, you'll know just how painful pink eye is for affected animals. So it also presents a really major welfare concern, as well as having pretty substantial impacts on growth rates. And we've seen that from lots of studies in beef cattle. We don't have exact estimates for how many Australian dairy animals are affected, but we do have some limited veterinary sales data on eye medication. And based on that, we're estimating that at least 15 to 20% of young stock are affected by pink eye, but it's actually likely to be substantially higher than that, because we know that not all animals are treated with eye ointment specifically, particularly in dairy herds. At Dairy Australia, we really do recognise the significance of pink eye, and we're actively working with other players, so Meat and Livestock Australia, as well as internationally, to find more solutions for you as farmers. But since we're barrelling into the pink eye season, we just want to share with you what we know about pink eye to date and what you can do to become pink eye ready. So I'm just getting a bit of feedback. Sorry, I'm not sure who. All right. No, I'm not sure who's. Can everyone just make sure that they're muted? I don't know if anyone else is getting that feedback, but let's make sure everyone's muted. Lovely, thank you. I hope that what you hear today from our guest presenter will really challenge your thinking about pink eye. I think Mac presents some new ways of thinking about pink eye that perhaps you haven't heard before. But really excitingly, we're really encouraged by the opportunities that are presented by Mac in terms of how we can better manage pink eye on your farm and actually make a real difference to your animals. So without further ado, I'm going to present our or introduce our presenter for today's webinar. So Mac Kneipp is a registered mixed practice veterinarian from Board of Vet Surgery in Goondiwindi, Queensland. He obtained his vet qualifications from the University of Queensland and has continuously pursued further education. He's got a Master of Veterinary Studies, membership of the Australian New Zealand College of Veterinary Scientists in Veterinary Pharmacology, and most recently, which is why we've invited him to speak here today, completed his PhD on pink eye in cattle through the University of Sydney. So Mac is arguably the most knowledgeable person on pink eye in the country. So we're really excited to have him here today. His special interests are feedlot medicine, ophthalmology, which is the study of eye medicine, and veterinary pharmacology, which is the study of the treatments that we use. So before I hand over to Mac, I just wanted to let you know that this webinar is designed to be interactive. So we are going to have a short presentation from Mac about his research and what he found, but we really do encourage everyone to ask questions and share any experiences that you might have. While Mac's presenting, if I can ask you all to please ensure that your microphone is on mute, and if you've got any questions, you can type it in the chat or use the raise hand button at the top of your screen, and we'll take questions at the end of Mac's presentation. So over to you, Mac.
Okay, Steph, can you see it?
Not yet, Mac.
Not yet. Hang on. Presenter mode. What else have I got to do here?
So on Teams, next to the leave button, there should be a share button. This looks good. Beautiful. Yep, we can see it. Thank you, Mac.
Okay, excellent. Okay, good morning, everyone, or if it's midday. My name is Mac Kneipp. I've been a mixed animal veterinarian for the past 39 years and recently completed my PhD on pinkeye disease in cattle. Pinkeye has always worried me as a clinician because the conventional story did not seem to add up. And this disease breaks many of the basic medical principles about contagious bacterial diseases and ophthalmology. As far as I could see, pinkeye treatments done by farmers were hit and miss, and vaccines didn't seem to work. In fact, the disease outcomes appeared to be no better than when I was a kid growing up on a farm, and I really wanted to try and improve outcomes for farmers and for their cattle with pinkeye. So this is what I did. This is a quick outline of my thesis. But I want to stress that I'm a clinician first thing and academic well, not second, even way down the end. So this is a quick outline of my thesis. I tried to offer a case definition of the disease to ensure that everyone's talking about the same thing. If you say I've got pink eye and someone else says I've got pink eye, is it all the same stuff? And the spoiler alert there, it's not. So what is pink eye? As far as I'm concerned, pink eye is a 130-year-old misnomer. It's been a mislabeled disease, an old-fashioned catch-all or umbrella term that should no longer be used, pink eye. Pink eye originally was used for horses with bad eyes, and no one would pretend that horses all have the same thing when you get a red eye in a horse. Sorry, that's gone forward. So anyway, I come up with a CAPE definition, and I reckon probably that's a bit cheeky of me because I don't think you'll actually ever get to my case definition. I said we should no longer use pink eye, but we should maybe use the other term, infectious bovine keratoconjunctivitis. But I actually made a definition and published it in America, etc. And as far as I can see, the definition is impossible. And as Einstein said, in theory and practice are the same, but in practice they are not. I found other things about, how much we're using, in ointments and things and how much it's affecting our cattle. We sell, in the year that I first checked, 2018, they sold about $9.67 million worth of pink eye ointments and spray in Australia. That's enough to probably about 2.8 million cattle are affected. The global prevalence, I did a thing with a Nebraska university, and it's probably about 2.78%. A lot of this stuff is fancy stuff. You do modelling and carry on, but trust me, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I found that I gathered data on an on-farm experience with pink eye in Australia, and we got 1,675 responses. The risk of pink eye was higher on farms in southern Australia of a smaller grazing area with cattle less than 2-year-old, and if they did not run zebu, Bosingidus type cattle. And if they ranked their farms as having higher fly levels, low rainfall and high dust levels, they are more likely to have problems with pink eye. The median amount farmers spent in Australia on pink eye in 2018 was $250 per farm. And they reported spending more as the herd sizes and the number of cattle affected increased, their perception of the impact on the farm productivity increased, and their ideas of how much it affected animal welfare increased. So they obviously treated more frequently if they thought it was very painful, etc. They also treated more frequently if they had higher fly worry, if their herds contained Angus cattle, and if they bred on farm and were located in southern Australia. I did a 2-year-long randomised controlled vaccine trial, and the vaccine did not work. Do not waste your money. I did a treatment comparison trial of popular pink eye interventions, and I might quickly touch on those hopefully later. I also did a pilot study of one calf where we used high-performance liquid chromatography to work out how long the ointment in one eye or the subconjunctival injection of penicillin would last in the tears of those eyes, how much the concentration to be above the level to kill any bugs, and surprise, surprise, it was much lower than we're told. It's got Orbenin and Opticlox have a 48-hour claim. We could only detect it there for 4 hours. So it probably means you've got to treat cattle at least 3 times a day. Okay, so I've sort of concluded with all this stuff that we really need evidence-based guidelines for treatment of pink eye, and that the best way would probably educate cattle veterinarians and producers, and we may be able to improve the outcome. But keeping doing the same old things, as far as I can see, will just repeat the same mistakes. So pink eye is a highly visible disease. It's a highly misunderstood disease, and I don't think it's a disease at all. I believe pink eye is not really a single disease at all. One review I read said that from time to time, the name IBK or pinkeye has been applied to nearly all eye conditions of cattle characterised by tearing, conjunctivitis and keratitis. Nothing's changed. They're still doing it. The infectious disease narrative of pinkeye as a single eye disease entity caused by a single bacterium just does not stand up to scrutiny. It is like calling all colics in horses the same thing or all diarrhoea in calves a single disease. No, they're just clinical signs, and there are many different diseases, worms and viruses, bacteria, changes in feed, weather changes. So pink eye is a clinical expression of a complicated corneal ulcer in a cattle. So ulcers, which are scratches over the clear bit of the outer layer of the cornea, can either be simple or complicated. A simple ulcer will heal by sliding over the clear stuff within 3 to 5 days, and you'll never see anything much at all. A complicated ulcer is too wide or too big for that to happen, or too deep into the stroma, the body of the cornea, or it's got contaminated with sticks or a bit of seed or something, or hair, or it's got infected. And those ones can't heal in that way. And then you need a blood supply to come in and fix it. That complicated ulcer is what we are describing as pink eye. So this healing process that needs a blood supply, etc., in cattle is called pink eye. Or if you want to make more money and be a vet or researcher, you call it infectious bovine keratoconjunctivitis. They're interchangeable words. So I don't believe pink eye is caused by a single bacteria, even if it's got a sexy name, Moraxella bovis. I don't believe it's highly contagious and spread by flies. Many years ago, one South African, when you're allowed to do such things, tied cattle with pink eye up head to head and couldn't spread the disease. I don't believe it's spread by flies. I don't believe the resistance is heritable. And despite doing a thesis on the topic, I just don't believe pink eye is a real disease. Rather, it's a label of a complicated corneal ulcer of cattle. So cattle, like all other species, are subject to many different eye diseases, but we label them as either pink eye or cancer eye. That's it. You know, what else you got in a cow's eye? Has anyone ever seen a fungal keratitis in a cow's eye? Have they seen a, stromal abscess? Nah, pink eye, cancer eye. It beggars belief. We have books this thick for dogs and cats and horses, and in cattle, 2 pages, pink eye, cancer eye. So we've got to get more subtle about what we're looking at. Oftentimes, say these cases I'm showing here, all these are presented to me as pink eye. The first one on the left there, that's a stick poked up through that bull's eye and hit him in the eye. The second one, the Frisian steer there, that's got herpes virus. The third one has the obvious bit of straw stuck in his eye. And the fourth one is a cancer eye in a Hereford. Every one of them was presented to me as pink eye, and I can give you many, many of the same sort of photos. So oftentimes professional help is sought too late, and I don't mean to push the vet thing. I'm just telling you that when I go and see things on farm, you tend to change people's attitude to what it is. You improve what they're doing, and you can move on a little bit better. So now the contagious bit. Nearly all diseases of cattle appear to be contagious because they live together in a herd and they're exposed to the same environmental and nutritional challenges at the same time. So in finding a bug that normally lives around the eye, which is Moraxella bovis, or a commensal bacteria as they call it, in that eye when you've got a scratch in it, does not mean it caused the disease. But that's what the acolytes of the IBK, the infectious model, will try to tell us. Ever since Frank Billings, a researcher, who was determined to find a bacteria and make his name by it, we've carried on with this story about being a bacterial disease. Then you don't need to make a diagnosis. You just get antibiotics, a bit of ointment, and a vaccine can prevent it. But I'm telling you, it's nonsense. So none of this apparent knowledge is true. And pink eye is certainly not game over. The idea that all pink eye is caused by a bacteria, Moraxella bovis, is laughable. It's dogma, not science. So I guess that makes me be able to claim the title of the worst PhD ever, because I've done a thesis on a myth, a disease that's not a disease. But the clinician in me won't let me keep playing along with it. So I'm really the boy who laughed at the emperor. How did the myth get started? Well, it was this Frank Billings guy. He went from American who went over to German laboratories in the 1880s, and he was in Koch and Virchow's laboratories. That was during the golden age of microbiology. They were finding diseases everywhere. They started with anthrax, and then they were finding the Black Death and everything, and they were working their way through them and discovering the bugs. They'd never known that before. And he was going to make himself a name. He came back to Nebraska University, and he was the very first specialised researcher in the university. He wasn't a clinician. Had he been a clinician, he would have known that his meticulous descriptions of the stages of pink eye along with the drawings that he'd done, you're completely recognisable today as the same pink eye we're looking at 130 years later. It's typical pink eye, but it's just what cows' eyes do when they have a moderate to severe injury to the eye. He started the infectious keratoconjunctivitis myth, and many have followed since. Much effort has been made by specialist researchers, but they never bothered to ask clinicians what they thought. And now it appears there's too many people have misspent their efforts to be easily able to correct the mistake. Pink eye disease represents 130 years of blinkered research, a 130-year-old misnomer. Research pink eye is definitely not the same as pink eye in the paddock. How do you make pink eye in the lab? You take very high doses of a highly concentrated solution of a virulent Moraxella bovis and you drop it onto a damaged, or what they call preconditioned cornea. How do you precondition the cornea? You either scratch it with a piece of wire, that's the wire technique, or you burn it with a UV lamp. All described in literature. People do it still this day. In California, they scratch them. In Minnesota, they burn them. But, you know, it's if you added any soup of a sewer water to an eye with a scratch or a burn on it, the cornea, of course it will become infected and become worse. So how is that a contagious disease? Even after this, not all eyes develop it if you put Moraxella, because Moraxella is actually lowly virulent. It can't melt a cornea. It has none of the traits you need to be severe. And in humans, when humans get secondary Moraxella, which they do, they've always had a bunch of diseases prior. It is never a primary pathogen. And no matter what you do, you can treat it and it come better, providing you fix what's going on underneath it. So, you know, if it's so contagious, why do you get it in one eye and not the other? And it's really contagious. It's spread by flies. Surely the flies are going from one eye to the other. But, and another thing is vaccines can look very...
Mac, you've just hit the mute button, sorry. He's gotten too enthusiastic. You're still muted. If you hit your space bar, it should unmute you. No. No, still muted.
Can you do it for him, Steph?
No, I can't. I reckon, Mac, if you go back to Teams, so down in your bottom, yep, there you go. You're unmuted now. And then share your screen again. We can still see you, but not your screen.
Okay, hang on. Why has that happened?
So we can see just a desktop. So I reckon if you stop sharing what you've got there. And then hit share again and just show where your PowerPoint is.
Okay, what are we up to? That one. How's that?
Good stuff. Well done. Good recovery.
Sorry about
well
that.
done, Mac. I could see his hand waving as he was talking. This is how passionate he gets about eyes.
Yeah, that's it. Imagine me as a surgeon. Anyway, so vaccines can look promising in the lab, but they're not tested in the same way. You know, what they do is they take a bit of the bug and they vaccinate the cattle first, and then they don't scratch it and they don't burn it and they drop it on the eye and say, look, told you it made it work. You know, that's a joke. So you can't actually create, if you know anything about vaccination, you know, you can't actually easily create immunity on a mucosal surface, and eyes are a mucosal surface. So, you know, I think that unfortunately vaccines aren't what they think to be. Now, I'm just going to try and go forward here, but I bet you I do something wrong. Suddenly I haven't got a mouse. Here we go. I'm back. Righto. Can you see what I'm doing?
You haven't gone forward. Yep, now you have. Beautiful.
So, as I said, I've become an expert in a non-existent disease and nonsense, but I did learn a fair bit along the way. I did a big study. I took a lot of eyes photos. Holy heck, I took a lot of eye photos. And of course, I live on the border of New South Wales and Queensland. We had COVID, we had a drought, we had, you name it, we had it. But anyway, I learned a heck of a lot, even though I was learning about a nonsense. I learned you need to take a closer look. You know, more is missed from not looking than not knowing. Assume makes an ass out of you and me, all that. Yet we don't often use even the most basic ophthalmology techniques in cattle. If you use the same techniques that they'd use in a horse, you know, put it under a dark sheet, use the stains, purple lights, magnification, it's amazing what you see. All those animals were presented again as pink eye, but look, they've got scratches in their eyes. So you can shine them up and you see them. And I learnt that this is not pink eye. That's a dairy cow with a cancer eye, and it's common in Friesians. I learnt that that is not pink eye, or it's certainly not a surface disease. And this is one of the exam questions to get to the American Vet Society, and they want you to answer number C, Moraxella bovis. That's the cause of that, according to them. But I can tell you it's absolutely not. It's actually a penetration wound. It's had a cactus or something go right through. And I can explain to you why that happens, but it's complicated and we'll skip it. You know why I know that for absolute certain. There's no doubt in my mind whatsoever that is not a surface bug. So when I went through all this and took all these photos, I suddenly worked out that you could, if you describe just 4 bits of the eye very clearly, you can actually describe every single eye. So conjunctiva cornea, the deeper, and the ocular pain. So these, I started to score all these eyes, and I worked out if I did the conjunctiva and cornea, I could score them. And I'm thinking, I tried to make it then something we could make an algorithm out of, and AI will go to work, and then you'll end up with eventually an app on the phone, which we have a prototype on my phone, but I've lost interest, or the University of Sydney lost interest in me, and vice versa in MLA, and that sort of disappeared off the planet. But, I can certainly score these eyes. I have a way of scoring them. They're either acute, chronic, or recovered, and the severity is 1 to 5. Now, if they're recovered, you're wasting a lot of money as farmers sticking things in there that are better. And that's also a big problem. If the animal's recovered, you are wasting treatment giving it. And I think that happens all the time. People ask me all the time, so what is the best treatment? We don't want to hear all this stuff, Mac. Give us the best treatment. Well, take that one, for example. That farmer, all he wanted was more ointment, maybe an injection of antibiotic. But I said, look, I've got to see you. It's been going on too long. He's got a very well-fitted patch, you can see, and patches are really good if you fit them well, but not in this case, because this was presented to me as another chronic pink eye, but you can see it actually was a sandburn. And so whilst a well-fitted patch is very valuable in a lot of cases, it's not there because it was covering up the issue. Once I removed the sandburn, it got better. So in my survey, I found these are the treatments people were using for pink eye and how they judged them of low, moderate or higher efficacy. I'll skip that pretty quick because I'm running out of time. I'll be very quickly run through a few results of my comparison eye trial. Now, in that comparison trial, I trialled the popular treatments in Australia, which are pink eye ointments, subconjunctival injection. That's the one of the Hereford there with my dirty finger, but up under the eyelid there, giving penicillin and dexamethasone usually, and sometimes atropine. That's called subconjunctival injection. It allows you to put antibiotic and anti-inflammatory in the eye at very low dose rates, so they don't cost you as much as if you're giving an intramuscular injection at 1 mil per 10 kilo or 20 mils, 16 mils per 400 kgs for penicillin, etc. So we compared the ointment, we compared the subconjunctival injection, we compared injecting in the muscle with oxytetracycline, long-acting antibiotic, and we compared a patch, and we compared doing nothing, and we compared the combination of all these things. I couldn't keep doing nothing. After a little while, I said, I can't keep this, because I was watching animals go blind. I thought, I can't do this. So I rang the university and I'm not going to do that, positive controls anymore. I'm going to treat them. So this is basically what happened with the treatment of low severity. In low severity pink eye, everything works, which just tells you the cow's eye has a marvellous ability to recuperate. Didn't matter which we really used, everything seemed to get better. And these are moderate ones. These are what I'd score A3 on my scoring system. They're pretty severe, these. Some are stained and some are not, which is why you can see the green. I've stained them up so you can see where the ulcer in the eye is. And we found in the moderate ones that this is medium severity combo followed by patches, then the intramuscular oxytetracycline, and then the subconjunctival, and then the ointment were the best. But, the subconjunctival and the ointment weren't very different. And eyes can recover without treatment. Sure, and everyone knows that. A lot of people don't treat pink eye, but they may not recover how you like it. A dog with a broken leg out the back there can recover too without treatment, but it's going to be quite crooked. In the case of a cow, it may be that they're blind. And whilst that's, yes, I agree, that's recovery, I guess, but if they've lost sight, then, it's not a good thing. So I've got my slogan for treatment of active pink eye is that any treatment is better than none and more treatment is better than less. And if you can only treat once, then the second bit of this, the more treatment, means you've got to use something that's longer acting as a single treatment. And of course, my farmers can mostly only treat once when they muster them for other things. So it needs to be long acting. I think in the dairy situation, you've got the opportunity to repeat treatments, and you should repeat treatments. So this one, these are really severe. These are very nasty eyes. They score 4s and 5s for me. If you see these little black dots, that's the Desmond's membrane. That's the last layer of the cornea before it pops through that hole. So every one of these has a melting cornea. It's horrible. They're different stages of healing, but I can tell you it takes a long time to get to this bit. You know, this is at least a week old, and mostly they're 2 and 3 weeks old. So you should be able to get them before that happens. Unless, of course, the animal did actually hit its eye on a piece of wire and burst the eyeball in one go. The severe ones, nothing works. You know, the horse is bolted. The only thing that may help is a combination treatment. Again, my findings were that the longer the treatment lasted on a single application, the better it ranked. Patches were best, followed by intramuscular oxytet, followed by subconjunctival Pendex, and then cloxacillin. But yeah, they say it lasts 48 hours. It doesn't. I don't believe it does, and I would need to do a bigger study. Mine was only a pilot study, and everyone lost interest when I showed that something didn't work. So can you imagine treating a complicated corneal ulcer in yourself or your horse with a bit of ointment every 2 days? You know, never mind the fact it's a penicillin that shouldn't even kill Moraxella because it's a gram negative, and penicillin kills gram positives. And in fact, you dairy farmers started all this on us because when those ointments turned up originally as mastitis ointments in the late 70s and early 80s as I graduated as a vet, and everyone started shoving them in the eyes, never mind they had the blue stain to stop you putting in the vat. So, and the stuff in it, methylene blue, is actually toxic to eyes, but didn't matter. In she went, and the blooming stuff was working. And so these guys in Missouri, Weber and Sales, Weber decided to do a PhD on it. He said, this stuff, everyone's using this stuff. Cloxacillin's the name of the ointment. Cloxacillin is a narrow spectrum penicillin, okay, particularly made for staph. But it's a narrow spectrum penicillin. It's not even broad spectrum. And it shouldn't kill gram negatives. So he said, right, I'll go to Missouri and I'll collect all the stuff off the eyes and I'll put it in a plate, an agar plate, and I'll put cloxacillin on it and I'll see whether it kills it. Guess what? It didn't kill it. Grew all over it. And he said, heck, this Moraxella is really hard to grow normally. It's a fussy bug. It's hard to grow. And we've got something to make it grow. So his second article in his PhD was, here, I'll make a selective media for growing Moraxella. And he puts the cloxacillin inside it to make it grow. And that's the most used treatment for pink eye probably in the world. So I'm not saying that it doesn't work against pink eye. I'm saying that it doesn't work against Moraxella, but it probably works well against other things that are not Moraxella. And of course, there's heaps of other things going on. So I actually think ointment's a good thing, but, you know, more often than what we're doing, and don't presume just because the ointment worked that it's therefore killing a gram negative called Moraxella. So treat early. They shouldn't try to get this stuff. You know, the one with the fly over the side, I mean, that's eviscerated eye. The whole guts of that eye have come out. Above it is what we call a pop eye. The only way to cure that is surgically remove the eye. So treat early. Now, what are the risk factors for pink eye? Well, according to the surveys and my studies, the risk factors were higher on farms in southern Australia, smaller grazing area with cattle less than 2 years of age, if they did not have zebu or Bos indicus, and they ranked their farms as high for fly, low rain, high dust. So obviously breed, age, opportunity for eye trauma, stalky grass, stubble, brambles, long grass, even soft seeds like sesame type seeds, you know, if they get into an eye, they can't blink them out, and they certainly can't put their claw up like we can and get it out with their finger. They don't have one. So it becomes a real problem. It just sits in there. And then we have other things like UV lights, you know, flies, dust, close contact. But hang on a second. They're all the things, right? Flies, dust, close contact. In my area, the reason I really wanted to start studying this at the start was that you can have pink eye absolutely rife in your herds out in the paddock, just going through them. They put them into a local feedlot, and there's a lot of feedlots around here, no pink eye. I did a little thing where I checked how much pink eye treatment do I sell feedlots, and it's vanishingly small, and most of it's going into their horses. You know, so you just do not sell pink eye stuff to feedlots, and why is that? They are close contact. They got flies, they got dust, they got wind, exposure. What the heck? I reckon nutrition may be much more important than we think, and I certainly reckon vitamin A might be part of that, because vitamin A deficiency in cattle can make weepy eyes. Not your case down south, but I think everywhere the reasons eyes get injured can be different depending on where you are. And this is the main reason why. The shape of their eyes and faces make breeds of cattle more or less prone to eye injury. Look at this, how much that cornea is a cap sitting on top of the eyeball. It's bulging out. That cow didn't have any pink eye, but look at it, compared to the drought master there that's got a hooded eye, they call it. It's recessed. If all those risk factors we talked about are to be true, UV light, flies, dust, blah, 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 how come you get more of it in southern Australia than northern Australia? We've got much more UV light in northern Australia. We've got many more flies and we get less of it. So breeds obviously gazumps all those risk factors. The reason is you have pop-eyed cattle and they get trauma. And in my clinic, I go out the back there, I just spayed a pug this morning, or a French, whatever that, bulldog. And, you know, I'm never surprised if a pug or a boxer dog turns up with me with eye disease. And we certainly don't think that every pop-eyed Cavalier King Charles Spaniel has a weepy eye during spring, that they have a contagious disease, even though we have outbreaks and see 5 or 10 of them in a day. They've got poppy eyes. They're going to have trouble. So I'm sorry, I don't really believe this, the pink eye story. I don't believe in a lot of the risk factors, including flies. All the studies, most of the study in flies have been done on Musca automalis, which is the face fly, and they'll quote it in articles you'll read and you'll see it in the brochures. Face fly doesn't even occur in Australia. So, and there was a guy, Schubert, he tried to make face flies go into cows' eyes. He put 30,000 flies into one room with a cow and they wouldn't land on the eye. And he said, well, it's like a horse. You can lead it to water, you can't make it drink. He got very frustrated. So eventually he made little cages and put it over their eyes. And finally the flies did get at the eyes a little bit. But you can find the bug Morixella bovis in eyes, and you can do all these fancy studies, which the fly people did in the 80s. And they're really quite good studies. But then to make the leap to say that's causing that eye disease there is just not right. We have Musca, this one probably Domestica or the Tusiama, whatever the bush fly is. We have plenty of them. But, buffalo fly are much more traumatic. They cause much more trauma around eyes. And yet as you go further north, when you get buffalo fly, you get less pink eye. So I don't get the eye thing, the fly thing either. I'm not quite a believer. And dust, that's me after doing a day in the dust and flies and everything else. And I certainly had pink eye at the end of the day. But could pink eye be on any farm? Could it just be a hygiene problem? Seriously? Are they just, if you get a kindergarten and every kid starts getting trouble with their eyes, conjunctivitis, etc., and they all rubbing their eyes and they're all there, it'll spill over. It's actually not really sort of like contagious, as more hygiene. If you could go around and wipe their snotty noses and their faces all the time and keep them clean, it wouldn't happen. Or if you go home after you got this pink eye that happened, that was a Melbourne Cup Day in 2018. Hell, that was the worst day I've ever been in. It was terrible. And when I came out, I had pink eye. And, of course, there's one fellow once claimed to get pink eye, but when I looked at the old article, it came out of, South American country, and actually it looked like he was just trying to get time off work. And he was trying to sue his dairy farmer boss. So he declaimed, and that made an article out of someone. And, and it's zoonotic. It can spread to humans. I don't think so. So, I just washed myself up and cleaned my eye out, and I had no problems the next day. So the pink eye vaccine, this is my favourite saying. I've made up my whole thing. You can't vaccinate against a poke in the eye. That first one is my article, a randomised controlled trial. The pink eye vaccine in Australia does not work. And how do I know? I did the only randomised controlled trial in Australia. Pink eye vaccines overseas do not work. And I did it. I was part of that second trial there in America when they said, if it's not Morixella bovis, it must be this new bug, or Morixella bovoculi. And Morixella bovoculi was only a rediscovered bug that used to be called something else, Brandhemia ovis or something. But, they just keep coming up with these new ones because they've got to make vaccines. Well, I was part of that trial there, 2-year-old randomised blinded control trial for a conditionally licensed Morixella bovoculi. Didn't work. Said, didn't work. Let's get it off the market because it's only conditionally. But then one big company bought out one bigger company bought that company out, and now it's available and everyone's making a new vaccine against a bug that has not even been proved to cause pink eye. Even when you scratch and burn the eye, you can't make it with Morixella bovoculi so far. What the heck do we need a vaccine against that thing for? It's just a bug you can find. So I did a literature review of all the trials since 1960, the vaccines that are available, and guess what? It has never worked in the paddock. Do not waste your money. I mean, there is so much evidence, and people have done like Loy et al. 2020 and May et al. 2020, Sheedy et al. They've done all this stuff, and there's no evidence that it works for protection against pink eye in the field. And it can't, because it's a poke in the eye most of the time. So there's plenty of evidence. No one's listening. We can go deeper into why pink eye vaccines can't work or won't and can't work, but that requires an understanding of mucosal immunity. And my wife, Kathy, is a vet. She said, I lose my audience when I start talking about that stuff. But suffice it to say that pink eye vaccines cannot work because it's not one single disease caused by a single bug that you're trying to vaccinate. And two, it's the things that go on in eyes don't allow you to get something you injected here, get up in your eye. It's not going to happen, okay? If you systemically, to get something into your mucosal surface on your eyes or your respiratory tract, your gut, it's got to go via your Peyer's patches. And that takes me about a day to explain to people why that works. So why bother? I've tried to tell people about my findings, but there has been some resistance, even hostility. So I would not recommend spending the time that I did to do this. It's bloody hard work. And, I know I was told the vaccine trial I did, because it was a 2-year-long trial and I did it by myself, it said it would cost the drug company $10 million to do. That's what someone told me. My reward for completing it and then trying to broadcast my peer-reviewed published findings to my fellow vets was to be uninvited to conferences, to speak at conferences, and to have my postings on Online Vets list moderated and be labelled as an anti-vaxxer with an agenda. But at least it spurred me on to learn about my latest hobby horse, which is immunity, the one that my wife tells me I'm not allowed to tell you about because it goes too long. But we know about that black box now. You're meant to believe you get something that's in magic and it comes out the other end. There are good vaccines out there, really good, but there's a lot of rubbish too. But we're meant to just magic and believe it'll all happen in the black box. But the black box is shrinking, and that's me shrinking it. You can work it out, and you can work it out down to the little molecules that send the signals, but people don't want to know. So anyway, thank you, Stephanie, for inviting me, and thank you all for listening. And I'd like to put it open to any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mac. I might ask you to unshare your screen so we can see everyone. So as I said at the beginning of the webinar, please feel free to chuck your questions in the chat or raise your hand and you can ask Mac directly. But Mac, while we're waiting for everyone to think about their questions, I have one just to kick us off. I think the really big key take home for me is around pink eye being an injury to the eye, not an infectious disease. So yes, you get an infected eye, but it's not about the infection. It's about preventing the injury to the eye. So Mac, we've got tons and tons and tons of farmers on the call. I've got my dairy heifers that I'm just in the process of weaning. Summer is notoriously challenging for us for pink eye. What are the 2 to 3 things that you would encourage every dairy farmer on the call to do to manage and prevent pink eye in their calves?
Can I just tell me first how to stop sharing? I can see share, but I can't see unshare.
You've stopped sharing, Mac.
Oh, excellent. Right. So if you want to prevent pink eye, it's a really vexed question. It's hard. Slowly, maybe, it's not a genetic thing, like I said, heritably, but if you could change your breed to be less pop-eyed, that would be good. I know that's very long-term and too airy-fairy to do. Anything you can protect your eyes. For example, depending on where you are, if you can mow your stalky stuff and feed it to them in a way that it's not dangerous to their eyes. When I was doing my trials, I go along, every farmer I visited, I'm not boasting here, but every farmer I visited in that trial, no matter how long they had their problem for, and some said they'd had it year in, year out, some said they had it for the previous 6 months, and I went there and said, I'll treat it for you, or I'll do a vaccine trial, or do both. And every one of them got better within about a month, every single one. And that was because they would ask me as I was going along, and I had to recognise that I couldn't tell them all the stuff, otherwise my trial was ending too quickly. Because with the very first farm I went to, he had these, he was a hay merchant, so he had all these very droughted little weaner things, and he had over 120 cattle with pink eye problems, and it had been on for a long time. And anyway, it was poking them in the eyes the way they had the hay feeders. They were looking up and the hay feeders poke. He's a hay merchant, so he swapped the type of hay, made sure it wasn't so traumatic, and he got different hay feeders. And I thought I was going to be there for a month or two doing all this wonderful stuff, and 2 weeks later, completely fixed up. So for weaners, obviously, they're more, if the trauma, because they're low down, can you do anything about that trauma? can you give them more shade? Because UV light, for example, is another type of trauma they could have. Is there things in there? I've gone down to places where I've just found it's a particular type of grass in the paddock and it's at a right height to affect certain animals. So you need to get rid of that. You know what I mean? Or you need to do, can you mitigate it in some way? And if you see problems in your cows, say particularly, this might be particularly applicable for dairy farms, treat them early. You know, I would say, for example, and this is off-label, I don't know how often you're allowed to say that stuff, but, you know, you don't need as much ointment as they're telling you to put in eyes. Nowhere near it. It just goos out over your thing. Your eye can only have 30 millilitres is how much an eye will hold. That's pretty low, you know what I mean? So you don't need to put much in there before it's spilling out and you're wasting it. But if I was seeing the cattle regularly, I'd treat them regularly. And don't let it get to the stage where it becomes a hygiene problem and spills into all the cattle. Now, you may not see your weaners that regularly, but getting them in and treating them, separating them a little bit, it's not, again, because I think that it's contagious, it's because it's a hygiene thing. You wouldn't want that kid at, you know, primary school rubbing against your face or their next kid. Of course, it's going to be an issue. So you try to be neat that way. If you got a feedlot and you've got lots of dust, well, obviously you try and mitigate the dust. You know, if you can spray things, dust down, etc., etc. And nutrition. Keep the nutrition up to them because of the thing I say, when they go into a feedlot, any pink eye seems to disappear. To me, the only thing that changes really is nutrition.
Yeah, great, Mac. So I mean, for me, thinking about how I'd apply it practically on my farm is when you look at the paddock that you put those weaners into, have a look at the length of that grass, or any other things that, you know, whether you're feeding in hay rings and things like that, and probably there's a good chance that it's right at eye height. So as they sort of put the head in, they're getting that exposure. Mac, we've got quite a few questions coming through, and I think Becky's one
Steph,
really is.
Sorry, mate. And yeah, that, I did mention, like, do fly control. It's not that I think flies, you know, are spreading it willy-nilly. I think flies cause annoyance and trauma, and they throw their heads around. You know what I mean? And they throw their heads around, they get injured. And so look at things that could be traumatic at the height of the animal that you're dealing with. And it's not always obviously traumatic. It can be soft, but it still causes trauma to the eye. You know, you get something little and soft in your eye and you can't get it out, well, that's still an issue. And remember that cattle have a third eyelid and things can get behind third eyelids. And, you know what I mean? I know it's you can't go and wash all your cows' faces all the time, but if you could, I bet you'd get rid of pink eye.
Yeah, that's great, Mac. That was one of the questions that came through was around fly control. So you're saying that, yes, fly control is still really important, but it's not necessarily going to stop the spread if you're not mitigating the things that are actually causing the damage to the eye in the first place. So, Mac, a really nice segue from what you've just said. Becky's asking, if it's not contagious, why does it always come in waves?
Well, you know, why does UV light come in waves? Seasons come in waves. And guess what get most affected? It's obviously smaller cattle, much more than older cattle. And look at their height. Look at like in my area, it occurs, I seem to see it much more in the western areas when we've got drought, okay? Not rain. Some places get it more when it's rain, but it's drought for us. And I think that's often a vitamin A deficiency is one of the factors. So the way I try to do it is that a multi-causal thing where you do it like you're playing that Trivial Pursuit game and you've got to put the pies in and you win when you got the whole lot round. You know what I mean? So you can fill the pies round with different things. And for one farm, the bits in there might be completely different from another farm. But once you got the pie filled, you still got pink eye. So, you know, yes. So I think we see it in drought. I think in that period then vitamin A deficiency in cows doesn't cause dry eye like it does in most other species. It makes them weepy-eyed. So, and then our cattle in drought then are pushing their heads in under, you know, really brackishy or really nasty brambles and things to try and get at whatever's green underneath. So I think that's why that happens in that period.
Yeah, and I think, Mac, you and I were having a conversation some other time. You know, this has been a topic that's been on my mind for quite a while, but you talked about how all the animals are typically exposed to the same thing at the same time. So they'll be in the same mob. They're all getting exposed to that grass at the particular height. They're all getting exposed to the hay in the hay rings, etc. So really interesting, just a comment, Mac. So Todd's saying that, yeah, it makes sense. The trauma injury story is my farm had lots of thistle and we got lots of troubles with pink eye. So Mac, one of the other questions I had for you, so this is not one that we talked about before, but I was thinking about questions that might pop up while I'm waiting for some more to come through. Some farmers have used pink eye vaccines and they see, that they've been successful, and I say successful in inverted commas. Have you got any comments on your thoughts around, where you do see, success with pink eye vaccines? Is it because the Moraxella is what's causing that secondary infection in those eyes, or is it something else? Is there something that we're just not seeing in those kind of anecdotal cases?
So, Stephanie, I never want to open the door for Moraxella at all. So, when you've finally proven that miasma is not causing disease, then you go, it is just bugs, and you completely forget the miasma thing. But in fact, miasma does happen. Miasma is when it spreads by smelly stuff, and smelly stuff can get you. So miasma theory predated, germ theory, and now we've moved into epidemiology theory. My guess is, and you heard it first here, was that the next one's going to be immunology. We're moving into immunology. But, you can see things. If you don't do a randomised controlled trial, then it's really hard to say that it actually worked, because, of course, it's seasonal. We have good pink eye seasons and bad pink eye seasons here. And, if you're lucky enough to vaccinate at the time, then good. But I don't think it's good enough to say that stopped it. I really don't. The contagion one, if I could just quickly backtrack there. There was this group of people in somewhere in England that it was an indoor sale of cattle, right? And someone tampered with the fluoro lights. And the fluoro lights, and all the people, over 60 people at that place, went to emergency centres or doctors because they all got pink eye. Because the UV light was no longer was letting UVB through the nasty one, and they got burnt. But no one mentioned what happened to the cattle. A week later, they would have been on all the farms. They said, my goodness, look at this outbreak of pink eye. We need to vaccinate. Do you know what I mean? So it can occur in groups if the same thing happened to you at the same time. If we all get an outbreak of asthma, we're not going to call that contagious, are we, or hay fever? But we're getting the same conditions, of course.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And look, like I said to everyone from the outset, and look, Mac, I did the same thing when I did my master's in drench resistance. You really challenge thinking, and you challenge that same old. And I think you said it really beautifully at the beginning, that you were so frustrated with the fact that nothing we were doing seemed to be making a substantial difference. So I think it's really great that you're really willing to challenge the paradigm, as it's known. And certainly I did the same thing with pour on drenches. So some really new thinking coming out. Mac, you talked about vitamin A, and the fact that there's some studies that suggest that vitamin A deficiency may play a role. You talked about the importance of good nutrition, and I think we are probably a little bit guilty in the dairy industry of neglecting the nutrition on our calves sometimes, and that probably does play into the pink eye cases that we see. But a specific question we had around the role of selenium deficiency. Have you got any comments on that?
No, we don't get it. We're not on the coast. We don't get enough rain to have selenium deficiency.
Yeah, sure. So and you've not come across it in your extensive
selenium,
research.
There are other ones like selenium, molybdenum, etc. that could be factors, say, in the overall health of the animal and ability to. But for your immune system, you really need vitamin D and you really need vitamin A. More D than A. And, we should be getting enough vitamin D, except we're making all our cattle black, which is a bad idea. But, as far as vitamin D goes, but we get a lot of exposure to sunlight, and cattle actually get a lot of their vitamin D, not from sunlight, not through their skin. They get it through their diet. So, I'd urge all you, anyone out there, if you're not taking vitamin D in a regular thing, once you're my age, then you're missing out on something for immune system, because your vitamin D is really required for things like your macrophages, etc., to work. Their immune cells, and their power supply is vitamin D. So, and after the age of about 60, your ability, to convert vitamin D through your mankial skin just drops off a cliff. So you need to supplement yourself with vitamin D, particularly if you're darker skinned. But being outside won't be enough. But I think vitamin A, D, E really out here is like for green grass. It's still very airy-fairy. I won't hang my hat on vitamin A. Just sometimes when the farmers come in from me from west of here in the red soil and dust out there, and they come in after I've sold enough antibiotic ointments and things that they've used, and I think I've made enough money out of this poor bugger, I say to him, mate, how are your cows? He said, oh, they're really droughted. And I say, go and give them a shot of vitamin A, D, E. It's like a shot of green grass. And sure enough, a lot of them tell me anecdotally that their pink eye cleared up. But it needs a lot more study. People have tried to do it, and it's quite difficult, and I don't know they'll ever really prove it. just overall good nutrition, it's very good for your cattle for not only their ocular immunity, but their skin in general, because the eyes are really only a form of highly specialised skin, and, you know, the rest of their immune system. So you've got to have them good nutrition. If they're poor and weedy and, you know, can't fight off a virus and get something else, and don't be surprised they've got a weepy eye and suddenly they've got pink eye. I mean, why would we be surprised?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the same goes for, you know, other immune suppressive sort of diseases and things like that. So if you've got BVD or pestivirus going through your calves, which we see a lot in dairy, obviously that's going to really knock around their immune system as well. Mac, another question that's come through from John, and not a silly question at all. So Mac, you did talk about pink eye treatments and sort of the differences that you found. John is just wondering if we can go back to that. So what exactly is the best treatment? Matt, can you in one sentence sum up what you would say as a consequence of your treatment research?
Mine is number one, treat early. Number two, more treatment's better than less. And any treatment's better than none, and more treatment's better than less. And the more bit was if you can get something to long acting. So the best treatment by itself, because, you know, in that trial, you don't do a bunch of treatments, you do one so you can compare it to another. And that's a really difficult trial. Trust me, that's never been published yet. I'm still trying to do it, you know, years later. It drives the epidemiologists with their models and Bayesian theory crazy, you know, because I feed in literally thousands bits of data and then they go, oh, we can't do it, and throw their hands in the air. And I think we should just put it in a table and say, look, this one got 500, this one got 300. But maybe that'll end up what's going to happen, just a descriptive thing, rather than try to model it and make it up to be something it's not. Well, I can go backtrack there a little bit, Stephanie. You know, I modelled something I think doesn't exist. The Emperor's New Clothes, you know, oh, it's wonderful. And it's got little braces on the side and it's got, you know what I mean? It's got sequins. No, it just doesn't exist. So, yeah, it's very difficult to say which is the best treatment, but more treatment's better. So in the order of what they actually got, I think that patches work best if they're well fitted and you check there's nothing else wrong, because they just protect the eye for a while. They've gone right out of favour in humans, right, because they keep you too moist. That's why you don't see people with patches anymore. But in a cow, I think it actually stops ongoing trauma, etc. And so I think it's a good thing to do. It shouldn't be an excuse to not look under there, but, you know, they're quite hard to look over. So I like those ones that pop out a little bit and they're well fitted and, you know, so they go on the cows better. So patches were the number one best treatment. The second treatment, to my surprise, in the trial I did, and these were all cattle less than a year old, right? The second treatment was intramuscular oxytetracycline, an antibiotic. So angiomycin or Bivitop or whatever other brand you use. And I was very surprised with that because I didn't think that one would work. But it's a long-acting antibiotic. It will come out probably in the tears and, you know, probably for about 3 days on one shot. So I think that's what that was doing, and probably was clearing up a lot of other issues. So, you know, if the thing had a bit of pneumonia or a foot problem, something else, probably clearing that up and concentrating their immune system a bit better and able to fight off then an eye infection, for example. And the third best was subconjunctival injection. This is this funny mix. You have to go to a vet, get that made up because it's off-label. Normally what we're doing is just putting penicillin and a cortisone, a corticosteroid called dexamethasone, sometimes a bit of atropine, and you inject it up under the eyelid. Some people put it through the top of the eyelid in the middle, but it's going on into the sac in the middle. And it just gives you a long action. You can't inject certain things like, people have tried oxytetracycline. Some of those brands of oxytetracycline are irritant and they can make the eyelids fall off or curl up or, you know, so obviously you don't want that. And you don't need much volume, you know. I gave the dose to a vet one time and they accidentally, instead of doing 0.5 ml, they did 5 mils. And they created them all. Look, they looked like they'd been to, you know, they were an influencer. And they had the good eye. Anyway, but they did get better really fast.
Kardashian cows.
And the next one after that was ointment. I don't think there's anything wrong with ointment. Don't get me wrong. I think it's good. And you can always use it as even a sort of bit of preventative. You don't see anything yet. You won't be able to see half the things I can see without a fluorescein light, you know, a purple light and fluorescein stain. Or magnification, you really won't be able to see it. Once I did that, I could see the scratches. And I was treating animals a week later that had new scratches. I could see where the old ones were. You know what I mean? So you can't see it unless you look. And I love ophthalmology because eyes never lie. They show exactly what's going on. You just have to find it. You know? So, but I don't mind if I'm treating an eye to put a little bit of the ointments in the other eye. You know what I mean? And the final one was so a combination of those treatments, those 4 treatments, was actually overall the best thing. I didn't do that often. I was doing it in rescue cases originally. I thought, I can't give this poor animal nothing. I'm going to do something. And that's what a vet does. That's what you as farmers can do. It's not as good as vet, but is be, individualise your treatments a bit. One size fits all. This whole idea that it's all caused by this one thing and therefore you can use this and this and this, it's a joke. Go and see what's really going on. Pink eye, as I said, was originally a horse turn, and we dropped that years ago. If a fella calls me up with a horse with a bad eye, I'm going to tell him what's wrong. We're going to fix it. If it keeps happening, we're going to stop using that hay, or we're going to deal with the lepto in his cattle because it's spilling over into the horse when it gets a scratch, which I've seen in the eye. Get it? Or, you're going to get silage eye where you are, where you're feeding and you're getting the infection from silage. And, so they are particular bugs that occur, but you want to go and find it and treat it. And there's only 2, in all other species, they say in all mammalian species, there's only one thing that can get directly through the cornea by itself, as in one bug, and that are herpes viruses. And then they go, except Moraxella bovis. So they don't say it occurs in deers where they've got plenty of Moraxella, or sheep where there's plenty of Moraxella, or all these other species. But just in cattle, please believe, just in cattle, it can penetrate through by itself, and it can cause the whole trouble by itself. And by the way, we've got a vaccine, and by the way, we've got a treatment. Seriously? It beggars belief. I'm not going to ring me up and tell me about your horse and tell me, I'm going to, mate, I want to see that right now, because that one is a fungal keratitis, and that one is a stromal abscess, and that's a deep keratitis, and that's a blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Mac, we've got just a couple of minutes left, so probably just time for one more question. So John's asking, should pink eye patches be sealed all the way around?
Depending on the type, John, it's a good question, but I normally only seal, if they're the ones you're making yourself, I'd only do the top and the sides. I leave the bottom open, because it's got the reason they've stopped using them in humans is that they don't circulate very well. So I reckon we should be making them out of breathable material. The less heavy, the better. And, if they can stick out from the eye a bit, because 80% of times patches were wonderful. 20% of the time, they were the worst thing in the world. They actually destroyed eyes because they were too close. And then they're tearing and they're touching the eye. Very, very bad. So in those cases, you want to, pull the patch off and do something else. So again, like I say, a patch is not sort of set and forget. You might have to reapply them, etc. But I was decently surprised that patches were the best. And a lady I know in overseas in California or somewhere, she's done a trial too, and she found that not only were patches better, but she patched animals without pink eye, and they grew better than animals without patches. Healthy animals without patches, they grew better if they put patches on them. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that. So you meant to patch all your animals?
Yeah, hard to believe. Mac, look, this has been wonderful, and a huge amount of interaction from people asking lots and lots of questions. So really a lot of interest in the topic. Look, I'm just going to summarise really as best I can. Sorry, Mac, I'm just getting a bit of feedback, so I've just muted you again. From my perspective, I think the really big key take-homes are around just being really mindful of what could potentially be causing injury to that eye. So whether it's grass, whether it's hay, whether it's... I heard one story about ear tags. So a whole mob of calves had pink eye, in inverted commas, in the same eye, and it turned out that they were very big, dangly, flappy tags that were irritating the eye, particularly where you see pink eye in, unusual seasons and things like that. It's even more of a push to go and have a look at what's happening in the paddock. Fly control is still very beneficial, really important to make sure that the nutrition is optimized in those animals. You can take steps like topping paddocks, taking hay out of hay rings and things like that to help. But it's really important to really challenge that thinking around the infectiousness of the disease, the contagiousness of the disease. If you're not managing what's causing the trauma in the eye, you're going to continue to struggle. So Mac, have I summarised that fairly in terms of your views on things? And any kind of final comments, I guess. Sorry, Mac, I muted you. You'll have to unmute yourself again.
Am I away? Good. No, that's a good summary of what's going on. I think you should just have a closer look. Challenge this theory that This stuff has been all this time. Could it be something else? I mean, and once you look, it just, the scales fall from your eyes. You can suddenly see that's not one thing. That's a lot of things, and it's all called pink eye. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And look, I guess I want to wrap up the session by just saying, I mean, we talked a lot about treatments and things like that. Really important to consult your own vet for any, specific advice specific to your farm. As always, the advice that we provide here is general in nature. But Mac, you've spent years and years and years looking at this stuff, and you're clearly extremely passionate. And as I said, it's always good to challenge the way that we think about things, particularly when the way we've been managing stuff for years and years and years isn't working. So I'm really excited that you had the up and go to look at this, and we really appreciate you sharing it with the dairy industry today.
Thanks very much. Thanks everyone for listening. And if you've got further questions, you can obviously email me. I'll try to reply to them when I can. Thank you very much.
That's a great offer. Thank you, Mac. So I will be sharing the recording, and when I share that, I'll Mac, if you are comfortable for people to reach out, I will share your email address at the practice. And be mindful. Mac is a very, very busy clinician, but if there's any additional questions that weren't answered today, Mac would be happy to help. But again, chat to your own vet around any particular things that are relevant to your farm. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.